Welcome to the Avert podcast, where we talk with some of the most creative people within North Texas and beyond. I'm your host, Michael Gibson Jr. I want to give you an update on my film Allura that I co-wrote and produced with my director, Nicholas Mothersbaugh. See the movie that the Scion Film Festival called A Beautiful Mother-Daughter Story and awarded it with the Best Space Travel Award, and that won the first runner-up in the Best Texas Short Film category at the Denton Black Film Festival. The film stars Lauren Brizendine, Maddie Lee, and Nicole Fancher, and is about a single mother training for the mission of a lifetime as a NASA astronaut that has to make the choice between her dream to travel into outer space on the mission of a lifetime and the love of her daughter, whom she would leave behind. We recently got accepted into the Fort Worth Indie Film Showcase, which is taking place July 25th through the 27th. And for more information, visit fwindiefilm.com. You can also follow Allura on Instagram at Allura Film to check out the trailer, see behind-the-scenes photos, check out interviews with the cast and director, and be alerted to upcoming film screenings. I also want to give you a heads up about friend of the podcast, Billy Hensley, of the band The Wire Rims. Their band will have a few performances coming up on June 6th at Backyard on Bell and at Andy's Bar in Denton on June 28th. You can find out more information by following Wire Rims on Instagram. Now on to today's podcast. This episode does touch on a few topics that might be upsetting to some. So I want to give you a trigger warning before we proceed with the episode. And I want to take this opportunity to also shed some light on a few things. 1 in 3 women in Tarrant County will be affected by domestic violence in their lifetime. Safe Haven is a domestic violence service provider in Tarrant County that provides assistance to families healing from violent relationships. If you are in need of assistance, please contact their 24-hour hotline at 877-701-7233 or visit safehaventc.org for more information. There are also many organizations out there that do amazing work with the military community. I suggest doing research and possibly making a donation to one, but today I also want to highlight the American Red Cross, which has many services for both civilian and military. You can find more information at redcross.org and make a donation today. This episode's guest is Kate Morgan. She is a critic, writer, and poet currently residing in Dallas, Texas. During our conversation, we discuss domestic violence, the creation of Film Will Never Be Dead, some of her upcoming projects, and so much more on episode number 46 of the Avert podcast. Consider yourself warned.
You know, that whole Chicago thing where, like, all of the neighborhoods are very, I would say, not racially segregated, but nationality segregated. Like, it can be problematic at times, as far as, like, getting incorporation of full integration in places, especially, like, the north and south suburbs, where you either get a suburb that becomes either 88% black and then has an issue with, you know, if somebody dumped something in it, and that's why the property values plummeted and it could become that way. Or you have one that's faring fairly well, and you can maybe get 12% total integration in there between every non-white. Get what I'm saying? You know, your property's either worth $66,000 or it's worth $300,000, and you have like those 3 black families in town who can have, like, you know, that nice house on the golf course, and they're just like, they're fine with it because they're like, I don't want you riffraff in here. And it's like, no, this is genocide. We need to stop. So my mom always had a big heart for that, and she always refused to leave places. And it was like, you know, and then she died in her 60s because of it.
What did your mom do?
My mom was a hospice nurse, actually.
Wow.
Hospice nurse for 25 years, won a lot of awards, had the kind of job where she was she only had an RN degree, but she was doing the kind of work you were supposed to have a master's for, because she was just that good at it and that talented, and really, like, you know, they'd look at the resume, they'd look at everything she'd done, they'd look at her references, and they'd just be like, we really just don't want to hire someone who just has the degree for this, just take it.
Yeah, things were so different back then versus now, where, you know, the high school diploma got you so far, where now you need a college degree and a master's and all this stuff. And even then, you're so overqualified for.
Right. I had to learn to make my own opportunities.
Yeah.
And like, not be ashamed to drive some Uber if I needed to between them. Because that's really how it's been. If like I didn't have something like my ex trying to court me back with a bunch of cash, right? Which is how I made limerent objects. I was like, I'm not coming back. Okay, cool. I'm taking this because, you're like trying to be here because mom died. Okay, cool. Okay, I'm not coming back. Oh, you just got abusive. Okay, cool. Well, that's over. So like, but yeah, like, for me, I don't have problems getting work because, my editorial skills are really, really awesome and I can freelance and everything else. My problem was that after I whistle blew on a garage door services company, like life got a lot harder. But I still was very politically connected. I still had a few things going on. So, I mean, like, and then there were always communes. Like anytime I didn't have work, there was always like some commune that was like, okay, fine. So like I've learned to make it no matter what. But it was just, and that's how I've been able to do so many amazing and weird things. Like not being tied to the idea that I needed a mortgage or a stable life or even like a partner that I'm gonna like be with. So like it helped a lot in that respect. But that helps me be able to do more. But part of that is like, I'm not ashamed to drive an Uber if I need to make sure that's the way I'm making my rent, if this is going here or if this is in that project. And it's weird. I meet people who want to come to my church or be in my film. One of the Barneys, the one who lives in Texas, tried to cast himself in one of my films once.
How so?
Oh, she's like, here's my card, like hire me. Like, I told him about one of my films. He's like, hire me.
Oh, like the Barney and Friends.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Barney and Friends. There were two Barneys. He was like the lesser of the two Barneys. Like he's, like I did the research. I still want to hire him, right? But he was like the lesser of the two Barneys.
Which is funny that you mentioned Barney because I ended up going to elementary school and, I can't remember the name of the oldest girl. I think it was Susie.
Yeah.
I forget what her real name was. It was like something Gloria. Her mom was a teacher at my elementary school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
And she came to the school at one point and came to visit and everything. It really is a small world.
Nice. Yeah. I ended up moving to Texas when I was 19 after not finishing my associates with nothing but a backpack. And I just knew the right people to get a job at Kaiser Permanente. And I learned everything about how a capitation plan using government programs correctly instead of abusively is like how it functions.
Yeah. And
I was part of the mastermind that rolled out Part D. So I've always been very fortunate. Like I end up in the right spot, I wouldn't necessarily call it 100% white privilege because, I mean, like technically my family has had a lot of problems because my grandfather was stolen from a Choctaw home and put in an orphanage. And then like, there's like a fallout that happens after that. You're made white, but then, your family's made white, but then it like just disintegrates. Like my father's family just came apart at the seams. There's that. And then there's always this consciousness that's with you where like white people will do a thing and you're just like, what? And you're just like, do I have to be quiet? Do I speak out? That sort of thing. So that complicates it. But I did have a profound educational privilege coming out of the south suburbs of Chicago, where I came from. The problem is that they are no longer. No Child Left Behind decimated everything that was. But I went to a school that was styled like gymnasium and had most of what would have been my associate's degree complete, and was a producer of a cable news show like at age 17 on an award-winning one.
Where was that at?
That was in the south suburbs of Chicago. That was in Midlothian, Illinois.
Wow.
Not the same at all anymore. Like if I went back to teach there, it'd be a much different animal. They've got these science teachers who literally try to teach this weird Catholic sex ed and creationism that like wouldn't have gone down in my day. Like it got really conservative, but I mean it got more integrated. It got more racially integrated, which is the part I like. But it's also like what?
Very cool. So, what did you say that you were working on your associates? What was it in? Oh,
my associates was in radio and TV production. Okay. My bachelor's was in journalism, which I finished actually at Northwestern State University in Louisiana. And that was a really interesting place. It really was because you were dodging active chapters of the KKK, just living your life. If you talk to a black guy in a Walmart parking lot, you get followed home. Are you recording? Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm recording.
So yeah, you get followed home. And you get followed home if you're talking to a black guy in a Walmart parking lot. So of course, my response is, let's go to the town steakhouse and sit on the patio. After getting followed home by the KKK. Like, let's do that. I was in the middle of a divorce. My ex did not come back from war well. We were both veterans.
Wow.
So,
what branches?
Army.
Both.
Yeah. So I had already gotten out, and he, because honestly, part of the reason why I left early was like, oh yeah, you need to go to school. But the other thing was like, yeah, this is going to be too much for you to handle. You've got a marriage like this, you've got this, and you've got this. Just here's your kind chapter. You can go. I mean, you're not that vested in this. But my ex got back, and he just the war had just turned him. War turned him from being a misogynist Baptist seminarian who, you kind of had to keep, keep your fire up with, to this all-out abusive, crazy person. I got my bachelor's anyway. Is what I'm going to say. I drove 3 hours to school in Natchitoches and had my internship at the Sabine Index and just persisted because that's the kind of person I am. Oh, this is tough. I'm going to get it. So that's always been who I am, right? So this is tough. I'm going to get it. Eventually, I call his unit commander. I'm like, you're going to have to put him in a barracks. This is getting ridiculous. I've got this documentation from, I really don't want to press charges. I really hope he can change. But I've got this documentation from therapists. It's, I'm going to have to live in this apartment alone and do it. And there's yes, of course, you're an Army spouse. If it's that bad, they do it. So anyway, I 24 semester hours and tried to initiate a divorce. It's really hard though, because if in Louisiana, if the spouse who's not in the apartment or the domicile enters the domicile at any point and spends a night there, whether you're there or not, it resets the whole period because you could have been in the same place.
Yeah.
So if you go on vacation and he spends the night there, it's a reset on the whole divorce process. So I had to wait to officially be divorced until I moved to Texas, which, I initiated immediately as I started my master's degree in English. Then from there, I got poisoned by a doctor who I think was out to get me ethically. I mean, I don't want to say for sure, but yeah, that's my assumption. And I read a whole bunch of Masonic texts and learned a lot about what the field would call metaphysics. Some people dismiss it completely. I would say atheism has several forms of metaphysics depending on who you're reading. And if you're reading something that comes out of England, it's garbage. And if you're reading something that comes out of China or Japan, it's probably spot on. So, I mean, there are atheist metaphysics out there. It's just, a lot of them would claim that the realm you're experiencing is still quite not the total understanding, and that whether you're interacting with medicine or not, the thought is really important in the healing. So that served me very well. I haven't had a single condition I haven't been able to overcome, or even just oh yeah, let's drive to the doc. Oh, it's gone. So that's definitely a big part of my life. And then the other thing, is applying that thought to somebody having attacked you or having been through something, and just continuing to persevere. I walked away from 2 Dallas news desks after open harassment, literally quid pro quo harassment. I went through that at launch DFW. And, at CW33, they just didn't want to run my stories the way I wanted to write them. The news desk did not like them. They're just no. Either change all of this, or I was like, this is a piece on, specific, unknown histories of Dallas that I need to tell this way. Okay, you know what? I'm done. Go ahead and take this. You can take what I've given you, and then we're done. And I just, I had this Twitter I formed after working with all of these marketing agencies, and on their projects, on my projects and everything else. And, I created Film Will Never Be Dead, and people wanted me at festivals, and then all of a sudden, I'm in Chicago doing things, people want my interns at festivals. So that's really fun to be able to write about films, to be approached to write about films. People literally send me their films, especially if they're experimental, foreign, or different, and they know that it's not going to get covered at any place where they're doing heavy Hollywood or heavy commercial. They approach me and they ask, please. And I say, of course, and a lot of people charge for this. And I'm just wouldn't that compromise my integrity? So I never do. I think that an integrity as a reviewer is more important to me than money. So I find other ways to raise the money, usually either through donation or through interest or through some sort of partnership. But, sometimes I fund it straight myself. Like, this month it is all from here. And, I make jewelry and sell it. I do other things. So like it all comes from different places. Sometimes this month is tight. I'm going to Washington DC. I'm driving Uber. So, for my budding church that has no funding whatsoever, but a lot of interest, right? It's like every time someone has like tried to clip me somehow, like, oh, well, you're in the middle of a divorce, you can't get a degree, or, oh, your stepfather's on drugs and you have no place to live, you can't finish your associate's degree. Like, like your mom's crazy, your stepfather's on drugs, and you're literally living in the back of dry cleaners, or like, or in a friend's apartment, like for a night and figuring out what you're gonna do. Like that was just not, like, accepting that wasn't what I was going to do, right? I mean, sure, like, it's happening to me right now, but accepting that as like the reality of my life, even when I was young, was just like, are you nuts? There has to be better. And like holding on to that idea and like persevering until it got there is always how my life improved. I know that a lot of people have a really hard time accepting that, because like the reality, with a capital R, they think they're experiencing, they think is the only one, but it's not. There's like this light in the background. You can just call on it anytime, whoever you are, whatever you believe. And I guess that's what Elohist Thelema is really about. Like, oh, what is the Church of Elohist Thelema, Kate? That sounds weird. That sounds like Aleister Crowley or something. No. It's actually this philosopher named Rabelais who was writing in a Catholic monastery about what he'd do once he was done being in a Catholic monastery. Like, what would life be like if I was able to just form my own order? We'd all be beautiful, we'd all have sex, and we would all not worry about having to make a bunch of beer or write a bunch of scrolls, right? I think that's like a beautiful line of thought that got corrupted in certain, I would say, Hermetic traditions of the 1900s. I don't necessarily go with those. But like, what would I do if my life as it was prescribed to me by this oppressive society, what would it do if it was over? And the answer is like, I would live, I would live according to my desires within reason. And I think that's like a good thing for people coming out of oppressive systems to think, right? I divorced an oppressive Baptist seminarian from a segregated church, like from a segregated denomination, and formed my, I became an activist in South Dallas while I was working with the Democratic Party at one point in my life, and then I formed my own church that definitely isn't into any of that. So yeah, I mean, like, wherever anyone's hurt you the most, the most important thing you can do is lean into it, and then like just turn it into this thing of like absolute beauty or glory. That's like, I think that's like the sum of my life. If something bad happens here, it's like, oh, it's time to dig in and turn it into something beautiful. And I would say I probably get that from, ends of the charismatic Christian tradition, but I still walk away from it and saying that it's like, this is still a little too patriarchal, a little too oppressive. Let's put a little bit more of that, not necessarily New Age, but those older ideas that really what humanity was about before Roman colonization. Let's focus on that a little. So anyway, that's what that's about. Yeah, anytime someone told me I couldn't do anything, I got a C in English in 7th grade, and I got a master's in it, right? I got a C in modernisms, and I ended up failing modern, or what we would call material feminisms. And I still teach English, right? Like, I still have like a 3.2. I still teach English. It's still enough. But like every time, like there's been this place where it's like your weakest one, and you want to let all of the nacre form over that until it becomes a pearl.
Well, first of all, as we're recording this, it is Memorial Day weekend, right. So I want to take a moment to thank you for your service.
And I would like to take a moment to remember those who have lost their lives in their service.
Yeah, I've got a brother that's in the Air Force, and but just any branch, just thank you. Just thank you for what you do. But then also, on the other side of it, where he talked about being in an abusive relationship, right. People tend to always, wonder, well, why did they stay, or what have you. But I applaud you for taking the gumption to realize the situation that you were in and taking steps to actively get yourself out of that. Well,
it came a point where I actually got the professional advice too, because I had a Baptist a more liberal Baptist, but a Baptist therapist who, the Army, we went through 6 of them, and the Army was paying a lot of money because they try to keep marriages together after deployments. And he's just like, your marriage isn't the kind that can help. He's not willing to get the kind of help he needs to do this. And he's comparing your not making the bed to his abuse against you, which was rape. I mean, it was like constant marital rape. Like I had no rights. And he's like, I can't change this. Like I can't therapeutically address this. So I'm going to suggest that you do what you need to do. And that was the day I was actually taking my GRE to like get into grad school. I had a full scholarship at my undergrad to continue graduate school there. And because of the situation, I had to just hurry up and go to UT Arlington and use my GI Bill, which, that's terrible. No, it's fine. But it would have been nice to be able to use the GI Bill for a doctorate, So I, people advised me, and people looked down the inside. I would say that if someone's like really going through it, and you've got like more than one person looking on the inside going, no, you need to be brave enough to take those steps. I desperately wanted my ex to change. I desperately wanted that success story, that you had at the front of the church where like, oh yeah, well, he learned to love me and respect me through that. But that just didn't happen for us. In my case, he never finished seminary, even though I constantly asked him to please just write. All he had to do was write a thesis. And he didn't even have to write a thesis. He just had to finish the thesis. It was half written, but he just couldn't do it. And I mean, I understand some of his objection, like Greavesian landmarkism, which was what the denomination was founded upon.
What is that?
Basically, in the 1800s, a guy named Greaves split off from the Southern Baptist Convention as it decided to go white eugenics. The Southern Baptist Convention decided to be more of a white eugenic organization until it was broken up in the 60s. That whole paradigm was broken up in the 60s. So what you had was this guy named Greaves kind of standing on it going, okay, we're going to have white Baptist congregations and black Baptist congregations, and they're all going to be independent. At the time, this is a good move for, let's say, black communities who want to be independent, right? They've got a system in place that intersects with the government pretty well, and they can definitely work on trying to have their kind of representation and everything else. I mean, as far as separate but equal can take you. But I mean, at the time, it was like, we're going to make sure that there is this bastion and like denomination and a seminary for this. But the problem is that as we went, as we got into the 2000s and 2010s, it was still a segregated seminary. They didn't bridge it. Yeah. So that's problematic. I actually ran into one of the remnant churches from this, as I was making a film in St. Louis, and they actually seemed pretty happy. They were only upset that they didn't have their school open behind them. They wanted to reopen the school, which was like dilapidated and stuff. And I took one look at it and I was just like, I think you should have a strong school, but I really just think you would raise too many unfailing abusive black patriarchs out of this, and that's why it's shuttered. Like you could please reopen it, have something good for your community, but think about modernizing it, please. So he had a hard time writing about it because he knew it was a contrived split. And he really didn't know how to take it, in which direction to take it, right? Because it's like, a lot of times when you are a theologian or you understand theology, what you're understanding, what you're proclaiming publicly is like, God wants this, but God is like this social architect, right? Especially when it comes to eugenics and God in the 19th and 20th centuries. You had a Eugenics Record Institute actually, having sermons contests and then distributing good sermons to different branches depending on what their backgrounds were, where they were situated, and everything else. So you've got a black church who's really into Margaret Sanger, and you've got a white church who wants to shut it down. And of course, we're still dealing with that, right? Which is why I'm happy to be out at Planned Parenthood as Elvis Salema going, can we just get to the point where we actually talk about women who are either doing sex work or having relationships that they don't want to have because of income? Because 75% of women who are actually getting abortions right now are doing it for reasons of poverty. Like every time they cite the reason, it's poverty. That's 75%. That's way too much poverty impetus.
Yeah, who is it that's citing that?
Guttmacher Institute, actually. It's a very, I mean, you can go and research that. It's a viable fact. Okay. So what we need to actually get to is the point where we really get to a point where we're saying, okay, we really need to be only be doing abortions for lack of maternal desire or medical reasons, because nobody should be too poor to have a baby. It should be like, this pregnancy isn't viable because this mother is not in a position emotionally, to give the emotional resources, or this mother, can't give enough resources because there will be a problem with her physically or a problem with the fetus physically. And, we would reduce abortion, I believe, by a huge percentage. I mean, we haven't done enough work to figure out what that percentage is going to be, but we would reduce abortion by a major percentage if we could just do that, and it would profoundly affect families of color.
Yeah.
So.
Sort of my issue with the whole thing. I know a lot of people have like a lot of input. It's a very like religion, politics, like all those are a whole bunch of, and especially when you drill down into politics. And my podcast, I typically try not to get into politics as much, but having you on, we're going to be touching on a lot of really hot touchstones, but honestly, I think it's so weird how, like, everybody can have an opinion, but, to have, especially like what happened in Alabama recently, where it was just, a gaggle of just old white men making rules about women's bodies. I was just like, that seems so cringy. Like, if it was, a more diverse community that came together and stuff, like, I could see more of that aspect of it. But it just seems so, For me,
it's going to be a full centrist on the issue. I believe that through the second through a certain point in the second trimester, there really should be no ban whatsoever, other than maybe age, right? Your parents are going to need to know what happened, because they're going to be caring for you after this. They're going to be caring for you through this. You're not emancipated from them, so they're going to be included. But outside of that, I really don't think that that any kind of bans before that second trimester point are really valid, unless you've got like some sort of father saying, I know I'm gonna take care of this baby, I've got the resources, and I'm here in court fighting for it or something. Maybe then we can talk, but even then I still want the woman to be like, if you're not taking care of me now, right? I'm putting my whole body into this. So we do have some room to debate there, but what we really don't have room to debate for, and that's what they're doing in Alabama and all of these places where they're doing outright bans, and what we were outside the Supreme Court protesting about, they just don't want any. And when you get into that situation, it's like, well, you've got this set of mothers who literally cannot, I'm going to be having a child at 9 months who has no kidneys, has no eyes, isn't going to be developed. They advised me to abort it so I could just sort of, grieve it at a point where it wasn't fully developed and move on, but now I've got to stare it in the face and put it in a grave, and I'm not strong enough to do that. Okay, I mean, if you are, great. If you aren't, let's not. That should be a personal choice. And then you've got the other set where it's like, I have 3 kids and I have no emotional resources for another one, and this was just kind of a guy I slept with one time because, the dad of these 3 is gone, and I'm putting everything I've got into these 3. At that point, I mean, that was Norman McCorvey. That was Jane Roe's argument. I don't want to take Roe's argument away. If I were to do anything legally, I would want to look at Buck versus Bell, which was the ruling from the 1900s, Oliver Wendell Holmes, that basically Buck versus Bell that Roe versus Wade rests on, which is, because we are forcibly sterilizing people because we cannot put everybody in a poorhouse, and this is just a bad way to build society, we're going to let people decide to abort children at will. Right? Because we can, if we can't do that. So even then they were citing the poverty impetus. They were saying we can't afford to take care of them, and they can't afford to take care of themselves and let them do it. But I would like to argue one more where it's like, we've developed enough society, I think, where we could have the social resources to take care of those who want to be taken care of for a period. And then, of course, help them find the kind of work that will continue their care. I mean, certainly, I spent like 30 minutes, as I was working with one of my filmmaking crews out of Illinois, walking around this place called the Campana building. They were thinking about turning it into Section 8 housing, as opposed to having it be like this collection of businesses that was working out of Batavia, Illinois. And that's further north Illinois, and they kept that segregated for a very long time. It was very difficult to make inroads into northern Illinois if you were of color. It's like, no, you are part of the city. Yeah. So, they've done better now. The percentages are getting better. And as I was out there making a film with these people, or with my group, we were sort of touring this building, and I was like looking at the plans to make it Section 8 housing. I'm like, I think this is cool. But what was interesting about the building was that it was originally a soap factory meant to give women jobs away from chemicals, because everything in it was natural.
Okay.
So basically, if you're going to have kids, you're in a good place. right?
Yeah.
And they eventually sold it to Dow Chemical, but Dow Chemical kept the recipe the same and everything. It was interesting. So it eventually became like a national corporate. And it just has this history of like employing women, chiefly women, making products for women. I mean, like, I think that that's a great way to handle poverty impetus if you're not ready to do it in a socialist sense or in a corporate government sense. So, I mean, there's more than one way to skin that cat, right? But I mean, I would think the thing that bothers me so much about pro-birthers, because pro-life is actually a really complicated position that evolved out of the eugenics era that took on a very interesting, complicated, basically ideology in the 1980s, in the 70s when the religious right rose. I'm all for, not institutionalizing the disabled, right? That's pro-life. That's OG pro-life. Someone in DC, I was on the street, handed me a pamphlet for, the liberation of the disabled. But like, I don't want to be an institution. I'm like, yes. Like, yes, no. I mean, if you have the ability to not be, we should certainly be diverting those funds to a private organization that will cost less. Because, if you really don't need that much medical care, right? If you need it, be around it. But if you don't, let's not. Yeah. So, that's really important to me. I really want us to move, like, as a country, I would like pro-life and pro-choice to start moving toward a mother wants this baby but can't afford to keep it. What do? A mother does not want this baby, and she has a good reason. How do we facilitate a smooth process for her transition to not being pregnant and not give her a bunch of social shame?
Yeah.
I think that's really what's requisite in a modern age or postmodern age, wherever we're living. I think it's what's requisite because compassion and care in that sense is very important. And we went there. In Washington D.C. With the Planned Parenthood national meeting. Even the Catholics, the liberal Catholics were just like, yeah, can we have a real conversation about women not needing to actually supplement their incomes with sex, either with a boyfriend or anything else? Like, can we really talk about the fact that women of color especially are not making enough? Yeah. Can we have that conversation? Because when a whole bunch of old white men who have plenty of access to resources are making decisions for women who don't, that's really problematic.
Yeah.
I mean, you aren't even including their patriarchs at that point, right? If you're going to have a completely patriarchal system, you're not including their patriarchs. I mean, the only patriarch you're including at that point who got there is Obama, and he was just, he was very liberal of this, right? So yeah, I mean, like, if you're going to have a patriarchal society and you're not including their patriarchs, then let's question the patriarchal society. I mean, let's question it anyway, but let's doubly question that.
Okay. Now, what was it that ultimately led you to decide to create Film Is Not Dead?
Film Will Never Be Dead?
Film Will Never Be Dead.
Easy. Publicists just kept contacting me, despite the fact I had nowhere to write other than, like, I'm going to submit this a few places and see if it takes. And I got tired of that. I'm like, well, I'll talk to Paste and see if that works out. I'll talk here. I got tired of that question. And they're just like, yeah, you can have your own, whatever, just come. And it was really interesting because, like, I assumed, like, after having a couple of standoffs with news desks and like, writing an article about how the Alamo was so racist and so sexist, like the Alamo Draft House. Because at the time...
Yeah, I was like, the Alamo?
No, the Alamo Draft House. At the time it was making some decisions that were making people in the community really upset.
Like what sort of...
Like they weren't doing the kind of programming like for women where like it was diverse at all. It was all really just following the owner's wife's desires, which is fine. But it's like, we need an outlet. Let's find somewhere else to go then. Like, what can we make Studio Movie Grill do? And Women in Film did a lot. Women in Film Dallas did a lot with Studio Movie Grill. They've done a lot with Texas Theater. They may do some with Alamo, but basically like now that Alamo sort of started receiving more from audiences as far as programming goes, and not just sort of making decisions based on managers and this is what I want, right?
Yeah.
So I wrote an article reflecting people's ideas on it, and it went over very well, except for like a few things where it's like, oh, I didn't realize that wasn't actually your position here. Okay, fine, sorry, I misunderstood that, make a correction. But like otherwise, like it was right. And so I kept getting lots of press inquiries, and I still do. I mean, I can decide I'm not going to do anything with Film Will Never Be Dead for a month, and I'll get 3 inquiries about, will you please review this, or will you please come here? And of course the answer is yes. Of course I will. I will unfailingly support your mission to ensure, to reach whatever audience you can with your work that isn't 100%, like, in a standard sense, commercially viable, even though it should be, right? You should be able to make something and reach that audience and make a profit off of it, but we've created this stacked system where, you're only really getting a lot if you've got these 5 people and it's, about this superhero. So, when I really like, I like that Netflix has broken that up. I like that Hulu, and I like that streaming has broken that up, but, so I was like, yes, I definitely want to see your work. And, I've never stopped being a fan in that sense. Like, take your film fandom to a point where you're like, being a champion for what you love, and then make a couple of your own and see how it goes. I've got like 3 wildly diverse, short films coming out this year, like as far as how they were made. Spider D is currently scoring Limerent Objects, which was shot on iPhone with lenses to make it look like Super 8. So it's like super retro and interesting. And then I've got Volvere, which I didn't plan on filming this year, but basically a bank of professors was being tapped for scripts, and I somehow got on that list over at Loyola University in Chicago, their film department. It's like, hey, Kate, do you have anything? Like, really? Yes. Okay. I've done a lot of internships. I've worked with a lot of young journalists. Okay, fine. Yes. Fine. Okay, yes. I'm an educator in this realm, even though my degree is in English rhetoric, and when I actually do teach formal college classes, I'm teaching children how to write. Okay, fine. Or I'm teaching ESL, but okay, fine, yeah. I'm in this cohort. Let's do it. And then I've got Forgive Me, Father, which is mostly Aaron Beasley's project, but because he did some work with me on Limerent Objects, that one is more like we're shooting it on this camera, we're doing it with this lighting. Like, that one's a lot more like this is using the best of everything we have. So it'll be interesting to see how all 3 of those go. I also have a short documentary on the Falun Dafa I'm currently working on editing and putting out there, but that's probably more of this made a few festivals. It's got an interesting, newsworthy bent. As I was sort of recovering from everything that happened with my mother in Chicago, I met a Chinese woman who's part of a sect that is oppressed there, and she also had a very similar, interesting experience with her mom, where her mom was dying and she couldn't really spend a whole lot of time with her, and we bonded, and I stayed at her place for a while. It's a Chinese metaphysical healing system that I would say is more atheist, right? So there are atheisms that proclaim some of the things I'm saying. So just for, really interesting couple. I've had a really interesting decade, really interesting life, but can you really trade a moment of it for anything?
No, absolutely not. Everything in your life, good or bad, brings you to a certain point, and what would we be without our experiences in life? Right. So, but where can people go to follow any information on these films?
Okay, right. So Film Will Never Be Dead is a great place to be. I'm on Instagram at filmwillneverbedead.com, but that sometimes turns into more diarism than it is like straight PR, sadly. Every time Facebook is just like, we don't like that. I end up on Instagram with it. LinkedIn, I'm there, and I regularly update on those. And then, pretty sure we're going to be doing a little bit more press with Limerent Objects, only because Spider D and I are looking to turn his, after Roxanne, after the biopic on Roxanne Shante came out, he contacted me. He's like, do you want this? And I'm just like, I'm really just kind of like a producer and somewhat director. Like, we're gonna need to hire a cinematographer. He's like, okay. Like, do you want this? Like, it's yours if you want this. And I'm like, okay, Dwayne. So, and I have a bank of cinematographers I can pull from, all of them award-winning, so, okay. But of course, I'll take auditions. That's some really good stuff. Let's do it. But, we're looking to have done something together with a team, with hopefully, we've had some friction with Aaron, so it might not be Aaron, it might be someone else. But, we're basically looking to film that, and I am still looking to turn Limerent Objects, hopefully eventually, into more of a series. And then I've actually got a couple of pitches out for something a little more, let's say, scholarly. I kind of had like this deep desire at one point in my cycle of creation because Texas history is just so hard to get people to teach right. right? I mean, you can finally get slavery into the textbooks. You can finally do a few things, but like it's so hard to teach right, especially talking about how the Spanish missions here didn't colonize the natives so hard. Like they weren't as bad here as they were in other places like South America, and even the French were like let's say in the Sabine area. Like there was a period of early colonization that was a lot more respectful. So I have a Native American scholar who's familiar with the region willing to co-write basically some of the first stuff on this. And what we want to do with it, we're just calling it El Camino Real right now. But basically, all over the country, there were systems of Spanish roads, and a lot of times they mirrored the Native American roads that were already there. And in Texas's case, and in San Antonio's case, that is very much true. So, what we're essentially trying to create is at least like a mini series, if not a full series, where you like either get 6 episodes or you at least get 6 writers, and everybody's from a different historical perspective reflecting their heritage. Because, in my family, my father taught me basically Welsh histories that countered the British histories, right? And my history knowledge was good enough to have never read a textbook, and I got through AP European Civ. I mean, like, just through conversations with my father, right? So the oral history I learned from my tradition that normally is only reserved for sons was very accurate, very good, and was very critical, and I was able to write the kind of essays that get you a 4 in an AP exam without opening a book. I find that good. Yeah, that's a good history,
that's
right?
Very good.
Exactly, that's a good history. So what I want to do is take that same, especially after learning about my own Choctaw heritage, my own Native heritage, I really want to take that idea and this is what the Chinese railroad workers were thinking. This is go through historical events where this is what the Chinese railroad workers were thinking. This is what the slaves who are now free are thinking. This is what this group is thinking. And not just have it be like, oh, well, I hired a good writer who did the research, but I want that good writer who did the research to actually work with the historian if the historian's not writing it themselves, Yeah. Because I really think that, I just remember growing up watching the Waltons and Little House on the Prairie and all that stuff, and understanding that the kind of deconstruction they were doing when they wouldn't burn the German Bible, when they have to because they're, it's the middle of, they're fighting the Germans, they want to burn every German text. No, right? You leave that in the library so people can see what it is and teach people not to be Nazis, right? So I really want that for history, because we can teach history, but even with a book, you're usually presenting one unified narrative. It's very hard to present 6 at once.
Yeah.
And I want the kind of program that for the next 20 years a teacher can be like, it's movie day. Because this is too complicated for me to teach you out of a book. They did that a lot with us growing up, in my more advanced school system, right? Every time they were like, we're going to talk about a humanist issue in the framework of history, in the framework of literature, in the framework of art, in the framework of music, and then they would add maths and sciences into it, right? This is actually how George Washington Carver would have developed the peanut butter. And have you eaten a dandelion? Do you know how nutritious they are? I mean, he was really smart, okay? This isn't like some guy we need to marginalize because he wanted to be all natural, right? So I always teach Lewis Latimer every time I've got a Black History Month, and I've always got kids. It's whatever grade point they're on, whatever region I'm teaching in, where it's the first time they've heard it.
That's the first time that I'm hearing of this person as well.
Okay, well, I definitely want to work on a project about Lewis Latimer, right? So Lewis Latimer was definitely co-invented the light bulb. Yeah, definitely co-invented, if not actually was more responsible than Thomas Alva Edison.
That's a lot of what you're starting to hear, though, is that a lot of his, what's the word that I'm looking for? His patents were actually done by other people, but he would take them up and... Yeah.
Right. So Lewis Latimer didn't have a problem getting patents noticed or anything else. He actually, if you study Lewis Latimer, he's also responsible for why the telephone happened. He also held out Bell. So we wouldn't have a light bulb or a telephone without the son of escaped slaves who became basically a Unitarian, I believe, or no, he was Universalist. The Unitarians did something else. Who became a Universalist, which is part of what the Elohist dilemma that I'm sort of championing right now is. it's based on some of those thoughts. Old style Jewish universalism, or even just other kinds of universalism, where it's like we are all one people and we all are different. All of our cultures are different faces of the same entity.
Same thing, yeah.
Yeah. So Lutz Latimer was really sharp, and he knew how to work patents himself, and he wasn't getting denied them. I mean, he wasn't in some sort of position where he couldn't, there were places he couldn't go because he was black, but he wasn't getting, he wasn't able to, not file paperwork because of that. He was really good with patents. So, for him, he probably was just like, oh, this man's really trying to invent it. Here you go. Oh, this man's really, these are good things. But, he had a list unto himself. And when you actually realize the situation, why aren't we talking about it more? I always lead off every Black History Month with that, but I don't leave it to that.
Right.
Because if we're living in a world where, we're constantly championing this homeschooled guy who, did it by himself, but, and I know people who homeschool on the sole basis that, Thomas Edison invented so much that I want my child to be as brilliant. And I'm just like,
no, there's more to the story.
There's way more to the story, and he went to a public school. He went to a good public school, but he went to a public school because he was in a position where his family literally was trying to get back up from the horrid.
Yeah.
Right? So we need to be cognizant of that, I think, in our humanist narratives, because I was fortunate to be exposed to many humanist narratives as a child. My family we came out of a prominent Jewish family and a prominent oil family through a prominent Jewish family who advised 4 presidents. We walked up, my great grandmother walked away from that family because of its traditional Jewish misogynies and wanted to live her life. And my grandfather was a working class union leader who got called out by Ronald Reagan. I'm getting called out by the Trump family years later in a very similar fashion, and I'm just oh my goodness, it had echoes. But and then my father's father, actually, after he got taken from his home, put in an orphanage, and he actually was adopted into a California oil family, and would just always talk about its perversity, these people who have all of this money and wealth are just disgusting, right? That was part of my heritage. So I was exposed to many humanist heritages where it's even though it looks like your situation's been degraded somehow, you are still this developing person who, even though it's been tougher for you, you are learning to shine and bring humanity up in these. And that was something my mom's original goal in life was definitely to be a singer in a band, and she got there with my dad, and they had a very solid band in Chicago, and then she realized, wait, all of this culture around it's gonna stink. I'm gonna go be a hospice nurse, right? And, for me, they were raising me you're definitely, you can be anything you want. You can be an actress, you can be this, you can be that. I'm just at the time, I was why can't I be a surgeon? And they were just can I be an accountant? Can I be a surgeon? And they're just no, we don't want that. But then I learned metaphysical healing, and I'm in my adulthood, I'm okay, you're right about that one. But I'm still going to be a teacher. I'm still going to be someone who works on people as they are humans. Even as a journalist, I felt like it was this calling where, you are writing about things in a fashion where you are affecting communities for positive change and the world for positive change. And I've always seen it that way. I've actually got a poetry anthology. We're going to be running a bunch of ads in the Paris Review and elsewhere. The whole literary world is going to be seeing ads for the new poetry collection I'm going to be working on. The first one I put out was on taking out the philosophies of Schopenhauer. And if you understand Schopenhauer, he was an atheist metaphysicist who wrote about a priori knowledge, beforehand, what you assume beforehand. And what a humanist in my position thinks about this. Sure, the tripod is here, right? The table is here, right? I can assume every time I walk up, the table's going to be here unless someone's moved it. And you can assume some of those things in science, but the places he took it, he's like an Ayn Rand, it's oh my gosh. You actually read his, and people argue that there are no metaphysics, but they're still, especially atheists, but they'll still be resting on things people like Schopenhauer wrote, not knowing that they are. So, as you study more in the humanities, especially at the advanced levels, graduate levels, if you're really into it, not just I'm doing this for my degree, but if you're passionate about it, what you learn is that thoughts do shape reality, even if it's not that classic New Age argument. You learn that ideology is still shaping our interaction with everything. It's shaping everything. So, you do have to examine it. And what you find out is like, oh, if all of these things I'm assuming about science and then are garbage, like maybe they are garbage, but then and then you're like, well, I don't want to trouble too much. And all of a sudden you see all of the black scholars writing about all of the abuses, and you're just like, yes, okay, good. We're on the right page here, yes. Like, so we had a whole anthology where we just wrote against anything Schopenhauer said about women or people of color. Like, we wrote our own poems and our own experiences. I had professors emeritus out of Harvard giving me poems about Buddhism. I had a up and coming, queer writers of color giving me something. So it's a good anthology, and we're about to take that to Kindle version only. I've got it up. I put them up publicly for the first 6 months, and then they go to Kindle, and then I prepare for the new one. And we're preparing for the new one, which is going to be on transatlantic slavery. And I do have a scholar who's been involved, in the transatlantic slavery study. Like, he's going to be helping me judge the poems. He's the co-editor. I always have a co-editor. So, I'm really excited about that. Like, that's just amazing. So I got an English degree, and most people who get an English degree, like, go into one of these things, but they do it with an institute, like, adjacent to an institution. Yeah. And it's like, no, it's just happening for me. I'm making my own. And like, I'm some sort of trailblazer. Okay. And every time I write back to one of my old professors, like, you're interesting as hell. Like, please keep writing back. Yeah, here's your letter. Here's your updated letter of recommendation, whatever you want. But it's always just interesting as hell because, where do you get the confidence to do something like that? Because that was the question for me, because, we talked a lot in graduate school about imposter syndrome.
Oh.
And women have it the worst. Women always have it the worst because, we're taught to serve and not. And, I just got to the point where I just started realizing, I am going to realize my highest self at the highest point, and anybody who's telling me otherwise is not going to be part of my vision, because I'm not being egoic with the sense of trying to dominate others, right? I'm actually trying to bring light to the world. So I have to have a healthy egoism, and Charlie Chaplin talked a lot about that. He really did. And there are sometimes I've had these weird flips and attacks where it's I've gotten really angry or something. And I've got in that whole Tony Robbins thing where it's but every time it comes down to it, I'm super angry that we haven't figured out how to make all the chocolate fair trade yet. Or I'm super angry that we still have this level of domestic violence. Every time I have that weird flip out, there's still this huge humanist reason behind it. I'm I've got to learn to control that. But no, I should feel confident in myself. Just, maybe I should think about how to address that and not be so angry. I could try and be calmer, but I do need to really, yeah, and the more I've understood that, the more desires I've had in this direction have been made manifest in one way or another, even if there's been some sort of weird struggle and it's been difficult and it's taken everything I've had. At the end of the day, it's here. It's here, it's real, it's here. We're in Planned Parenthood talking to Washington with a church of 15 people. How does that happen? And no, we want you here. We love your ideology. You're talking to everyone beautifully. We definitely want this idea to be made manifest and everything. We're going to take some of this, right? So how does anyone do that? And the answer is I am realizing my highest self, whoever tries to get in the middle of that or not. And even if I have a weird experience where I'm banned from Twitter for saying a thing, or I'm banned from Facebook for saying a thing, but there are stats behind it. I can post the stats. Even still, even if I'm a little weird and insurrectionist like somebody in the 1960s would have been, right? I sound more like Frank Zappa than I sound like some sort of major philosopher. But that's okay. We're going to have this Discordian moment right now because eventually we're going to realize the highest truth of this. And I think that's the interesting thing of working a theory like Thelema. So many people project things onto it because they don't understand it's a core philosophy to come out of Catholicism. At its heart, they understand it as it's what messed everything up in the 60s, Aleister Crowley. It's wanton sex. It's this, it's that. Well, only if you're desiring wanton sex. I don't. For me, Thelema is. I like things people would probably consider very vanilla and normal, but to understand that do as thou wilt is not like some sort of huge license. It's like, no, you're supposed to be doing it in the law of love, and the law of love is supposed to, supposed to come from, it's not supposed to be doing what you love, it's supposed to be doing things in love. Once you understand this, it gets a little less fraught with all of the projections, but every once in a while, I've just got like this anger somebody's like I have this anger projection when someone's like, I don't want this to be happening, like she needs to be discredited, and every time it's just hilarious. I don't have a Twitter check mark, but I'm in DC and Boston. Like, okay, I don't need one.
You don't need one. I mean, people tend to, especially with the way that social media is today. Like, I come from a background where I majored in radio, television, and film. Right. I minored in English because, I love to write. I love to read. I love especially, I'm such a voracious reader, and I read all sorts of different styles, but with the advent of social media, people are writing more, right, but nobody's reading. Right. They aren't reading, and nobody's connecting. People don't, like we are. We're across the table from each other. We're looking each other in the eye, taking all this stuff in. I'm seeing that with a lot of the younger people coming up. They're losing a lot of that interpersonal connection and those skills that take a society going forward and helping us grow together. And then with a lot of the issues that we're having as a society right now, with us being splintered and fractured, I think that's only going to be exacerbated by these things, people trying to get as many likes as they can through Instagram and Facebook and all those sort of outlets.
Right. And I do think that ever pandering for that much acceptance immediately, I've definitely gotten multiple, I've gotten hundreds of likes on something, and I've gotten thousands of likes on something I didn't even say, Kate Morgan said this, and it didn't exist, and how does this have thousands of likes? I don't know, we really need to figure out who put that up, and I really need to be suing them for libel. But that's a battle, I'm every time I set out to do it, and I look to find a lawyer, I get something positive to do instead, and I'm I've got to finish this. Hopefully we get here before statute of limitations runs out, but I'm not going to miss out on this part of my life because I want a protracted, battle over here. I just don't want it. But it probably would be wise to go and be no, you can't do this, you can't do this. But even Pelosi's having a hard time with it right now. Yeah. So I think it's important to realize that popular opinion does not make something substantive whatsoever. So if you're just going for as many factions as you can to like something, right? I would much rather go for that many factions to cast a vote at a ballot box, right? Can you actually come out and do this? Because I've got these 5 propositions that are going to be taking place, I'm not even necessarily running, but I've been on elections judge for 2 years now, and there are going to be these 6 propositions on the bill, and you really need to vote on whether or not there's going to be a hospital expansion in your town. Can I please get you out? I love the conversations where I connect and I talk with the people doing VR for good, and hey, have you thought about senior voting? Because it would be really great if we could have this experience for them where we don't have to take it out to curbside, and we don't have to get them in the place, but they can literally that would be amazing. Cause they're having they're trying to spin this wheel. It'd be really great if they could just intend. Because they're talking about them intending choices for television watching or anything else. Can you have them intend the choices for their civic engagement? Because they still want it. I think it's interesting that the young generations are harder to involve in that civic engagement, and then you've got these generations that keep wanting it past the okay, can you really make this decision, or is your son or daughter sort of helping you? I'm not here to judge if they're helping you as long as they're not telling you how to vote, but anyway, so yeah.
Which is, I voted for Bernie in the primaries, the last time around, but, people talked about how, with his education for all and stuff like that, I thought it was very interesting how, we going back to, civic duty and serving your community and stuff. I kind of thought that his idea on, having people either serve in the military or serve your community.
Oh, that's great.
And then, use that for, educational purposes,
Right.
I thought that, that was a great conversation starter, but everybody was like, it was just throwing it up. And I was just
we do have that in some sense. The Obama administration did make that somewhat possible.
Yeah.
And Trump hasn't rolled it back too much. If you do AmeriCorps, you can get,
yes.
So you do, but of course expand that, right? Like you should be able to help your local hospital. You should be able to help your local place. You shouldn't have to you shouldn't have to be like, oh, I've got to travel to either Dallas, Corpus Christi, or Austin in order to do this, right? Have a program where you can literally help your in-town stuff, especially if it's developing.
Right.
So yes, let's expand that. But, I think that that's wise. A lot of Bernie's policy, a lot of Warren's policy, a lot of Elizabeth Warren's policy. I like it when I hear it, but at the end of the day, I look at what they've already done in government, and I see the old white establishment there and how they've pandered, and I get a little upset. And I'm just like, can't we just run Julian, please? I mean, look at what he did with HUD. He got some good numbers out of HUD, and we definitely could continue, attacking homelessness problems. And Kamala's had some really good stuff with the education system and holding it accountable in places where it has been fraudulent. So I like that too. And sometimes I like to go that route. And I'm just like, can we actually look at these people of color who have accomplishments rather than like we're going to have the I got tested so I know I'm Native savior. Because for me, I didn't, for me, it wasn't getting tested. It was like literally like, no, you're constantly interacting with these people from these communities, and they have a sense and you have a sense, and then you tell them their family history and they go, oh, well, duh. Right? Because, if you're Johnny Depp and you walk up and say, I have an Indian princess in my background, right? No, you're not. But if you say there was an orphanage and this happened and this happened and this happened, they're usually very quick to embrace you and go, that's accurate. Right? Yeah. And I didn't really do a whole ton of research. I just knew enough. So, for that sense, it's like, well, yes, you have some heritage, sure, but you had the full white experience with none of the detriment. So I really need to know if you are in fact going to be the person voting for, that you have a commitment to these communities' color, and it's just not another turn where it's like, yes, we're serving them, but we still have, for instance, 83% white suburbs with property values that go up to $250,000 and $300,000, and then we have the black suburb next to it where we're trying to hit 100. Texas isn't as bad at that. Texas was a lot better with its exurbs. I mean, you still have some pollution problems, but you don't have you don't have that complete where your house is worth less than everyone else's in the country who is white, right? I need them to be really dedicated to that for me to be like, you have got my vote over Julian or Kamala. I mean, really, for me. But, that doesn't mean that they don't have good policy. It's certainly better than Trump, right? Certainly better than, people say make America great again. I say make America mid-century again, right? One of the reasons I like to work with Satanic Temple wherever I can is because, they have this deep cognizance that the Ten Commandments monuments are trying to knock down are deeply immoral. And if you understand what the Eisenhower work program did in the creation of an undocumented working class that could be abused, right? If you understand what that really was, as somebody who might be against the actual neoliberal conditions that created Nazism, I mean, they're on a mission from God, right? They want to blow down everything. And then you've got Jex over there until she said too much. You've got Jex over there basically doing the third wave feminism, the third wave Latin American feminism in a very, I'm kind of white and I'm kind of from Michigan, but also, let's actually get the mestiza. Let's get the queer mestiza out. If you understand those two factions, working as they did, they were actually they were working this specific third wave feminist and anti-labor abuse mandate coming out of a French feminist author started let's try to imagine this into existence in the 70s. She wanted it worldwide. So if you actually she came out of the Lacanian traditions of philosophy, which are actually they're Catholic, but they're anti-colonist Catholic. So when you understand that, you're just whoa, because when they when you actually like look at Hail Satan as a film and what it's deconstructing, you're just like, oh my goodness, like you don't even understand all the things you're standing for, but here, let me help you out. Like, yes, Eisenhower's God was problematic. This God we created in the 50s to trust in literally was about, was literally about creating an undocumented class to abuse and grow the food. Yes, let's question this one. Let's go back to let's go back to Out of One Many. We were ending slavery under that one with enough nudging from certain communities.
You mean Out of Many One?
Yeah, Out of Many One. Yeah, that one. Yes, that's exactly what I mean. But yes, Out of Many One. Like, let's go back to that because we actually did get an anti-slavery movement out of it. Like, let's bring back more of the Masonic gods we were able to do that with. Like, like the constructs, and like the hope that'll infuse into because the religious right that rose on the back of, we're literally going to invite classes from Latin America that we're going to mess with them while they have unrest because of communism. They're going to be unsettled. They're going to come here and maybe after 3 generations they'll settle, but they're going to be highly persecuted until that time, by literal police forces. Like when you understand that, it's like, yes, like I appreciate everything you're doing as a satanic quote unquote entity. Like, please continue. But yeah, so for me, that's a big thing. Like, whenever I see a Ten Commandments monument built in the time of Eisenhower, when they were rolling out, Charlton Heston and all that other stuff, I mean, I get a little upset because I look at a pack of Oreos, right? And here's the problem with a pack of Oreos. If I get the palm oil,
okay.
If I get the palm oil from a developing country, I'm contributing to global warming, and I'm also contributing to communities that are breaking down, and they just don't have a stable sense of self, and they really need empowered women, right? So I usually try to buy products from those places that are empowering women specifically. But palm oil is a huge, I drive an electric vehicle, but I could drive a gas-powered vehicle and be doing less harm to the environment than eating too many Oreos until they could make them with corn oil. That would solve that problem, and we can grow that domestically.
But then you also look at the issue.
Yes. Right. So we have to address that too. And then there's all the child slavery and chocolate and all we've tried to do, and the way the world is once we get a handle on the developed world actually trying to help make the laws in concert with places like Côte d'Ivoire, you have the developing world come up and buy all of it. It just negates it. So, that there's that to work on too. And, I find like the complicated political and theological positions between these two things a very interesting place to be. Right. Right. So, again, radical centrist. I was once on Tom Donaldson. I was actually on Tom Donaldson's podcast a couple of times, and he'll probably have me back on again. He has me on every once in a while because I'm different, right? I'm like this radical feminist who is also radically centrist. So it's like, well, no, it's not that you don't have any rights, men. The problem is the rights that you think you have are actually authored in a time where you were definitely oppressing us, and you still think some of that is your identity as a male or rights. Not every man, but the ones who are, yeah. So like, we actually need to erode this, and you need to have a new sense of masculinity, but you have rights. Let's talk about how you've been abused, and let's talk about how to fix it, right? So like, radically centrist. So like, it's an interesting place to be because it's not like, no one's ever fully happy with a single thing you say unless they really just want a common sense answer. Like, if they have like an agenda, they hate you.
Now, you bring up the term feminist. What does that term mean to you? Right,
so that gets complicated because people are like, oh, you only want women to excel? Clearly you're not thinking about the men. Like, well, no, feminists raise strong, good feminists, right? Not wounded women, but like good feminists raise strong sons, right? And they raise those strong sons to be partners to women as opposed to dominators of women, right? So we want that. When we say, when someone says they're not a feminist, I'm like, so what about the 1970s? Do you like having a credit card? I mean, like, feminism got you a credit card, okay? Feminism got you a credit card. Like, when people say feminism is just socialist, I'm like, well, I mean, yes, there are some socialisms that are feminist, but then, you look at the Soviet Union, you're like, did you like being a prostitute? Because, you had the freedom to prostitute in the Soviet Union as a feminist. It's like, was that what you liked? Okay, then go to it. But, like, they had a harder time with a lot of other things. Like, women were free to have sex with whoever they wanted in the Soviet Union, but they didn't have as many financial, like, freedoms, right? So, like, I can procure this, I can do this, I can hold land, I can do that. So, like, the question is like, what do you really want? And for me, the answer is, like, as someone who appreciates the continued empowerment of women, queer people, and regular people, right? Because there are men who have an identity wrapped up in being this conqueror or this colonizer, where if they like stripped that away and like focused on their own life, would have a very good life and probably have a much happier relationship with a partner. That's what I view feminism as. I definitely don't view it as degrading men. Sometimes I like have a thing where I like make a blanket statement about men. I'm just like, did I just really say that? And I literally go Google something about it, and I'm just like, oh, no, literally, like, this is like 94% of all domestic violence is literally either caused because a man has been coercive or outright abusive and a woman's fighting back. But the women go to prison more, right? So like you like see these higher statistics of women actually paying for fighting the back.
Prices, yeah.
Exactly. So like I'm saying these strong things because that's the actual reality. I certainly want it to change, right? I want it to be where anybody who hits anybody for any reason, needs to either like get some therapy and stop or be detained from doing so. I mean, that's the ideal. But when things are not reflecting the ideal, you do have to say the truth, right?
Yeah.
And in that case, if the statistics are not reflecting the ideal, you do have to talk about the truth, and sometimes it's offensive. That's okay. But, you definitely want an actually equal society. I mean, you want an egalitarian society. At my heart, I'm an egalitarian, I've said before I'm an egalitarian feminist. But then people are just like, what's that? Well, okay, fine. You believe in complementarism, don't you? Like, oh, no, I don't. Like, let's not. I suppose I've been fortunate in my life that I've been able to access as much as I have scholastically or theoretically, because a lot of people who have, come from situations or backgrounds where I did, they were not... they would have no idea where to even start or even have had like the nudges in the directions they have. And I feel very glad about that because it gave me pause to think more about life. Gotta get food. Okay, yeah. So anyway, gave me a lot more pause to think about my life. And, I'm always one of those people who thinks that a life unexamined is, it's just not something I would want. Maybe something someone else would want. Other people like that, but I do not.
And I know, me personally, I've always grown up, from my experience, I'm very much an outsider because I was born in another country, came here, I'm a citizen, and all that. But I've always been.
So what country were you born in?
I'm from Jamaica.
Oh, nice. Yes. Okay.
I was born in Jamaica, came to the States when I was about 9 months old, came to Texas when I was about 1.5 years, and grown up here all this time. I'm 37 now. And so I can look at all sorts of things from that prism of being an outsider looking in, even though I'm a part of the community and stuff, but, and have sort of that aspect on things. But growing up and even in my work life, I've always known strong, powerful women, from my mother and several of her friends, and even most of the jobs that I've had strong women leaders to look up to, and it was just second nature. It wasn't anything ever, weird or,
Yeah, gosh. It's harder to do that in Chicago. I mean, like, oh, you have Hillary Rodham Clinton coming out of the suburb. Yeah, but like after like a certain point in the 80s, it got intensely patriarchal so that you could have the color equation fixed and like someone like Obama rise, basically, right?
Yeah.
So that was problematic. And I think that for me, it's not that the women in my life weren't strong, right? I think
I don't know if that was...
Yeah. For me, it's not that the women in my life weren't strong, but like we did have like this moment like after the 1990s where it's like, no, you all are sitting down so this can happen. Like you are. Catholicism just sort of pulled that rope. But the other problem was, I think what the other problem was that, for my family, because I guess if you came from like white glory at some point and then moved out into the working classes, even if you're being a strong kick-ass person, like I've been a hospice nurse for 20 years and I only have this kind of degree, but I'm doing this, like that's a strong woman, right? But my mom's mind, it like wasn't enough. because, she hadn't made it into society in some way, right?
Okay.
Like the way the divides used to be, right? Between working class and that. So there's like this shadow or specter still haunting you, where it's like, you haven't attained enough, you're not Bell Baruch, basically, who was Bernard Baruch's son and formed all these institutions in New York, right? You're just you're just a hospice nurse. So there's that going on as well. There's that classism sense going on that isn't quite conquered. And I think that for a lot of people who have white backgrounds, that's the issue. It's not so much that it's because I think when I identify with my of color sensibility, it's you did all this stuff, oh my gosh. If I'm looking at it as a white person, it's you had to drive Uber to do any of that at all. How horrifying, right? You didn't have a family set you up for that. And I think that's what a lot of where a lot of white anger comes from. Because when they see someone of color succeeding in a way where they're actually establishing their family at all to do this kind of work for their communities, they're just well, I haven't been able to do that yet. And having both sensibilities, I really had to learn to curb that white side that's just going to be critical, right? That side that's you didn't have a family set you up for that, you didn't have this or anything. For somebody who went through what I did, what I have come up with is amazing. Who leaves an abusive Baptist seminarian and ends up with their own church in Washington, meeting with Planned Parenthood in Washington, D.C., talking next to, the largest accepted Catholic, liberal Catholic denomination, high-fiving each other. That's a huge achievement. That's big, no?
That is huge. That is really big.
So, where do I have the right to be critical? And the answer always is oh yeah, I'm looking at this from somebody who thinks I should be established to do this. You don't have the right to do it if you're not. That person who's of color knows that if they wait to be granted that right by some sort of social class, they're never getting it. So you have to make it. And I don't know, I found that identification to be my color identification to be useful in that sense. Because it definitely keeps me from being immobile. It's oh, well, yeah, no, I'm going to have to pay the rent this month and pay my workers. Right? Yeah, I'm going to have to be honorable in that sense, not oh, okay, this. So, I find that, and, some people call it the struggle, right? I'm struggling to become what I'm going to be. And I think that learning to embrace that is useful too, because if I had been complacent, right? If I had been a traditionally white, complacent wife, I would have gone back to my ex while my mom was dying and he was trying to infiltrate my life, or I would have not, So I find reaching for more to be very useful. And, I certainly had I had strong teachers. My mom was a strong hospice nurse. My grandmother she didn't finish being high school educated, right? So neither of my grandparents had a full high school education. So that's why anything that I'm doing is incredibly unique. You come from whites who didn't even manage to achieve high school educations in the middle of the inner city, and you've done what? How? Well, a little bit of probably, a little bit of the universe, probably speaking, but also teachers who are just no, you can achieve anything you want. You just can't let other people define you. You have to decide that somewhere inside you are self-defining, and you are going to interact with humanity in a positive way. And it's really hard for that to go wrong.
Now, I have a couple questions that I typically wrap up all my podcasts with. I know with your film background, I wish we had more time to talk about just film, because I just love talking shop with other film people, but we'll have to have you back another time to talk about that. But, as we wrap up, do you have a motto or advice that you typically tend to live by?
Yeah, that answer is let your highest self define you, right? And by that I don't mean go on some sort of crazy chase where you're doing a whole bunch of crazy stuff and not thinking responsibly. But don't let anyone hold you back at a lower emanation or sense of self if you know you need to be vibing somewhere higher. Just understand that you can work to make it happen, whatever your current limitations are. Because too many people get caught up in what other people want to define them to be rather than what they are.
How do you define happiness?
Happiness is interesting because, is it something you pursue? Is it something that happens to you? Is it something you work for and enjoy? And what I find is that I try to go for more easily definable emotions like contentment, joy, peace, or pursuit, just period. Like, like, oh, I'm having this struggle where I'm angry and I'm doing this, but I'm pursuing like what I'm going to see next. Like, this is not acceptable. Something else is going to be better. So yeah, I find that moment where you're just like at one with those qualities that you want that are positive, right? So just go for that.
What do you think your journey has taught you?
Oh, my journey has definitely taught me that, light and dark, like in the classical mythological senses, are not always what they're cracked up to be, right? There's socially acceptable and there's socially unacceptable. And sometimes the most important thing for humanity is hanging out over here in this socially unacceptable part. And you're going to have to be a little insurrectionist and pulling it out. You have to. That's what you're going to do. And there's no stopping it because you just want to see that reality and you want to see its realization. And you get through like all of the intention against you and you get through everything else by just seeing that beautiful picture. And yeah, that's big for me.
Which is very big because I was just having a conversation the other day with a producer.
Nice.
And you have to know your worth to be able to approach a stranger to be like, okay, this is what I'm seeking. This is what I'm asking for. I'm trying to get this thing out of you. I have to know my worth to, be able to approach the person and be like, and get the outcome that they desire. So that's
yes.
That just rings a bell for me. And then, how do you define success?
I don't know, like, cause the metric's different for every mission, right? Like, I have 15 church members who sometimes come over for bagels and philosophical discussions, but I'm like at all of these important national summits on like issues that are pertinent, and then I'm interacting with faith leaders in the community from other things that aren't going yes. So like, does a church need to have 5,000 members, or does a church need to have an effect, right? In the case of film, right? Does this need to go national and have like, huge distribution, or am I working my craft to a point where I'm going to get that project? And does this film just need to have a positive audience that's going to follow it into the next stage, right? Right? So where are we at on the journey? Is it incremental and everything else? And sometimes success is literally like, I had a good day. And that's it. And that's all I need to worry about. The opposite of success is failure is just giving up. The opposite of success is like, I wanted to get there, but I'm exhausted and I'm not going to rest today and try tomorrow. I'm just done. That is definitely not success. But like success can be like, I've had a rough day and I need to sleep it off. But I'm going to work on this tomorrow, and there is a point where this project is going to take off. So like, I say success is like never giving up on that vision that it's going to materialize, and then of course, going with it.
What would you tell your younger self?
I would tell my younger self that the, feelings of dissonance you feel from this experience that is not what it should be are accurate. And if you can learn to harness those more for action rather than, let's say, take the usual routes of sedation people want you to take, like here, have a bottle of wine, not like a glass of wine. Here, have a bottle of wine and go to sleep. Or, because I think that like, in white communities that were in decline, like the opiate effect especially, that was huge because, it's not so much that we needed to decline for Black excellence to manifest. It's just that some of us didn't know how to also go into that part of ourselves where it's like things are rough, but we're gonna make it, and we're gonna, that definitely came from my Jewish side. It didn't come from my Welsh side. My dad's still working on it. He did all these projects with big name people, but he just got to a point where he was sort of like broke inside after a certain point, and like hasn't been able to pick himself back up and be like, this is what I'm doing. He's just like, nah, I'm just sort of like zoned out and living my life. I think that's the huge thing, because like Black excellence or any other kind of excellence doesn't necessarily come from another culture's demise. It just, can you handle someone else manifesting themselves and going, that has no bearing on whether or not I manifest myself, but that's cool. Like, we should be friends, Can you really do that? And that's where my side of color comes in a lot of times. Because I'll find one side going, wait, why would I be upset? Or, no, you should have that, and I should have this, and we should all be okay. Right? Because, there's no limit to people being able to manifest themselves. It really is, how much you're willing to develop that sense of yourself, and then, not get into any sort of envy or, crazy trap where someone's more, someone's less. It literally needs to, and you don't even necessarily have to, like, if it is making you feel a little uneasy in some way, you don't necessarily even have to be that other person's champion. You can just be like, how would I do this differently? Why is this a thorn in my side, right? Like, what do I need to manifest over here? If you can, like, really get to that point, you can be very powerful. But a lot of people get caught in this trap where it's comparative. Yeah. And there just really isn't, there's definitely enough food and enough resources in the world for everybody to be manifesting themselves. It's just we're terrible at seeing that vision.
Yeah, one thing that I typically tend to talk about when I'm dealing with interns,
right,
is, I tell them, I try to walk them through the typical paths of what it means to try to get a job in media and stuff like that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, when everything is said and done, their path is their path.
Right.
There was a guy on YouTube who gave like the best advice. It was like, you should always be looking out at 3 different people. Somebody that's behind you up and coming, somebody that's a contemporary, and somebody that's, that you're aspiring to be like, but don't compare yourself.
Right.
Because you don't know what their path has been.
Right. Just admire what they have.
You don't know what they had to do to get to the spot that they've been in. You may have to, you may not necessarily know all the good and bad that they had to do to get there. But, and just because, like you were saying though, you may set out to do one thing and you may end up with roadblocks in your life, but things happen, may not necessarily be for a good or bad reason, but not all divergencies that happen in your road aren't all for bad. They could lead you down a different path that could be for something much better than what you ultimately set out for. So.
Right. I never assumed I was founding a church. Like that was kind of a surprise. Like I suddenly I walked away from I walked away from a Church of Christian Science and a Unitarian Universalist church after some certain things happened. So I'm like, no, I agree with what's going on here. Like, no, 2 white supremacists, you're going to do something else. And I'm just like, what? And I'm like, okay, it is. So fine. Okay, so I'm like starting to write out all these principles and like everything else, and I'm interacting with the Satanic Temple, and I'm just like, and the Satanic Temple's like wanting to keep me. They're just like, what are you doing for us? And I'm like, anything you want, but also, like, nope, I'm seeing this thing, I've got to do this thing. And then I'm like, maybe I actually do need to explore being Jewish. That is a part of my heritage. And like the rabbi refuses me 3 times and says, enjoy your journey. And I'm just like, okay, so I'm founding a church. I'm like reading out these marriage ceremonies and doing all, which are very different than our current conception of marriage ceremonies. They really focus on egalitarianism as the vows, right? I mean, right now we've got like stripped down vows where I'm no longer saying you're obeying me, and I'm no longer saying I'm honoring, and then we're writing in whatever we want. With an Elohist Thalamic marriage vow, it's very much you are my partner, and I'm vowing to honor you and your desires as you honor me and my desires as they are being made manifest on earth, right? That's the whole point of being desire, right? Because we often see ourselves as like changing in the elements of desire. Certainly like like the non-inconfluence of desires can create a divorce, and that does quite often in our contemporary society. Yeah. But what an Elohist Thalamic marriage vow is going like, we're going to try and make our desires not quite so disparate, but if they are, of course, we will dissolve. But we're actually going to make it a point to make our desires like concert and see how that works out. Like, and, acknowledging that that's something like, no, your desires don't override mine, right? That's the problem of patriarchy is huge. So I think that's how we're addressing it. So like, I come from a very specific perspective on this, and it's just been interesting to watch it take its own life. Like I'm like, I get to, like, as I didn't ask to go to DC, right? Like they asked me, like, I checked a box that I was clergy. I was going to Austin to lobby no matter what, and I checked the clergy box, and they're just like, really? I'm like, well, I do have people meeting for this. I do have this. And they're just like, yep, okay. So, I did well in Austin, and then they're like, DC? And I'm just like, yeah. So, like, I didn't ask. Like, this was a success. I manifest, this was made manifest. So yeah, things do kind of go in different directions, and I'm happy for that.
That's the podcast. Thank you again to Kate for sitting down with me. You can find out more information about her upcoming projects, by visiting filmwillneverbedead.com. Keep up with the Avert Your Eyes podcast or check out past episodes by visiting the website avertyoureyeспod.com. There you'll find everything you need to subscribe to the podcast, with links to Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Twitter, Facebook, and so much more. Go to www.avertyoureyeспod.com today, and don't forget to leave a comment or review. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Michael Gibson Jr., and until next time on the Avert Your Eyes podcast, consider yourself warned.